Welcome to Oklahoma Gardening. Today we're headed to Philbrook to learn more about their water lily pond. I speak with author Brian Dougherty about his new book that every Oklahoma gardener will want to read. David Hillock shares the Oklahoma Proven Tree for 2025. And finally, we'll learn more about how to avoid ticks in the landscape. Underwriting assistance for our program is provided by the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing. Oklahoma Gardening is also a proud partner with Shape Your Future, a program of the Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust. Shape Your Future provides resources for Oklahomans to make the healthy choice the easy choice. Oklahoma Gardening's 50th anniversary. I love sharing with you guys the cool things that plants can do.
People in Oklahoma love their gardens.
I feel like this is the people's show.
We all know we're working towards the common goal, and that's to produce the best quality television and information for our audience. Today we are here at Philbrook Museum of Art out in their beautiful gardens out back. And joining me is Director of Horticulture, Sheila Kanotz. Sheila, I mean, you offered to take me out to your garden. I didn't know I was going to need a new wardrobe.
Yeah, well, we are here in the swimming pool. So when the Phillips family lived here in the 20s and 30s, this was their swimming pool.
And this was their swimsuit?
I don't know. It might have looked a little bit like this 100 years ago.
So tell me a little, this used to be a swimming pool when they lived here.
Correct, yeah. And so when it became a museum in the 30s, then we backfilled it.
Okay.
And so we've turned it into this reflecting pool, really. And so when you're on the terrace of our villa, you get a perfect reflection of the Tempietto. And when you're at the Tempietto, you get a perfect reflection of the villa. So we dye it with a black dye, and that helps to get that reflection as well as to protect our koi, which are in here.
So is it a natural dye that you use, or what are you using?
It is a vegetable-based dye,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. Sometimes the plants are beautiful in that reflection, but you're kind of keeping them to the side intentionally?
Yeah, so we don't have any kind of floating containers that we use for our water plants. We just have these aquatic beds on the sides, so that allows us to maintain that reflection while also really getting to enjoy the beauty of aquatic plants.
All right, well, we got one of these beds here in front of us, and it looks like your water level's a little bit low.
It is low. We're doing some construction right now, and so we have the water levels lowered, and so it's a great time for us to be able to get in here and not, you know, be up higher with the water over us.
Well, I'm happy to help you work here. So we've got some hardy water lilies. Tell me a little bit about some of the maintenance. It's not too much, right?
No, overall, aquatic plants are fairly low maintenance, and it's always kind of fun to get in the water.
This is my kind of gardening in July.
Right, yes. This is Texas Dawn, so it is one of our hardy water lilies that Peyton picked out last year, and so we did a mixture of tropical and hardy. But as far as the maintenance is concerned, we really just get out kind of a curved pocket knife, and we'll cut off the yellowing leaves, the older leaves, and then when the flowers are spent, because the flowers last about 3 to 5 days.
Okay.
And so then we'll just remove them after that. So just kind of how you would your plants in your regular garden beds, we want to keep deadheading them to keep them creating more blooms and stay healthy.
And of course, in a regular garden, you're not too concerned about some of that organic matter that falls down to the ground. But in the water garden, you want to be a little more cautious of that, right?
Right, yeah. So we do try to capture all of that and get it out of the pool so it's not building up sediment in the bottom here. And that also is just, makes it worse for the oxygen levels that are available for the koi. So we actually drain this entire pool once a year, power wash it, get all that fish gunk cleaned out of here, and then refill it.
Okay, and so you guys have koi in here and a lot of babies as well. Baby koi, so quite the population to maintain. Tell me a little bit about koi versus goldfish, because they bring a whole other level.
Right. Yeah, the koi are beautiful. Everybody loves them. We do a fish feeding once a week on Thursday mornings, but they are larger and they like to spawn in the side beds. And so between that and them just kind of going through and they'll nibble on the plants, they do cause a lot more destruction than say a goldfish would. So we do deal with that, but we have several different wildlife in here, and so it's kind of like, we want to have the flowers and we want to have the koi.
I know,
so we make it work.
Just earlier, a snake swam by, a little baby, it's fine, and some baby turtles also. So it brings a whole different ecology into a garden.
Right, and definitely, like the dye helps us to protect the koi from predators like the great blue heron. But you'll see we have different kinds of birds that come through here. We have the red-eared sliders. We end up with a plain-bellied water snake, which love them or hate them, right? You know, it is a little bit of a non-starter for some,
right?
but yes, exactly, non-venomous, part of our ecosystem here as well, and we get toads as well, so we'll hear those in the spring especially.
All right, well, one of the things that I think is sometimes tricky is when you have a water garden, regardless of the size of it, is how to make it fit into the surrounding landscape.
Right.
And I think you guys have done a phenomenal job here. Let's talk about that transition of plant material when you go from a water lily that's low to the surrounding gardens.
Thank you. Yeah. So some of the things that we try to make that kind of transition into our garden beds are through either the color or the flower forms and textures. And so we end up with a lot of what are kind of marginal water plants in our garden beds in the back that could actually probably stand to be in these aquatic beds as well. They can stand some submerged water. So we have iris and we have hardy hibiscus like the copper king, which is one of my favorites that we have a lot of. And then we have things in our beds that could also stand to be albit like the thalia, also known as hardy water canna and canna. So yeah, we kind of...
And so a lot of those can grow. They like their feet in the water. And so you can use them outside. Sometimes we have a little wet area outside of our water garden because our fountain is splashing or something like that, right? Or if you don't have a water garden, they're a great use in some of those drippy faucet areas or something.
Exactly. Yeah, and all of these pretty well are full sun. So them can take a little bit part shade conditions.
Very good. And we talked a little bit about the ecology and the animals. These plants also play an important role in that. So the surface area is covered with the water lilies, but that vegetation that's in the ground also provides important habitat for the fish to hide, right?
Exactly, yes. It definitely protects them, and it helps us a little bit with some of the water filtration.
Well, Sheila, thank you so much for suiting up with me out here. This has been great.
Thanks, Casey. Always a pleasure.
Today we're here in the beautiful Color Garden at Will Rogers Park in Oklahoma City, and joining me is Brian Dougherty, who has recently retired from the Oklahoma City Community Foundation, and you probably have seen him on our show quite a few times in the past, but you're here today because you have turned author during retirement.
And it was kind of at the retirement party. They said one more thing, and it was the Kirkpatrick Philanthropies wanted to remember, I guess, me through retirement and publish a book on the parks of Oklahoma City.
It's a beautiful book, and I don't think there's a better person that they could have asked, because as a landscape architect, and I know a history buff also, you know, you did a beautiful job of the account of how Oklahoma City really was established based off of the park system, including this one we're at here today.
Yeah, and I want to say it was a fantastic thing. I knew of Bob Blackburn. I've talked to Bob Blackburn for years and different things, and I just said, Bob, why don't you co-author it with me? So you had that global history of Oklahoma City and then some of the unique parts of parks and horticulture and trees in Oklahoma City.
And it goes back all the way to the evolution of the land, really, and then fast forward to the land run, I should say, and then, you know, to modern day with Scissortail Park and everything.
That's right.
It's phenomenal. So, you know, I used to work at Myriad Gardens, you know this.
That's right.
And we all know downtown Oklahoma City has a lot of street names. And I think you brought those street names to life. Chartel, Classen, all of these names that were founding fathers, really.
That's right. I mean, you know, Wheeler Park and the Wheeler Bank, you have so much of that in that history as Oklahoma City's starting to develop and following this American park movement that pretty much started with Central Park in New York, and then fast forward 50 years and Oklahoma City's here. And, you know, it wasn't about one park. It's about a system of parks and how the Grand Boulevard developed, and there were 4 cornerstone parks, and how everything, and there was politics in it, and there were wars and depression and the Dust Bowl.
Oil booms, oil bust, right?
Everything happens, and it all affects the way the parks work.
Parks play a significant role in human health and human activity, and they recognize that early on, right? Can you share a little bit about that?
You know, when you talk about Central Park and you read any of those original accounts, it's all about give people a place to breathe. People were congested. They were there. We didn't have good running water. We didn't have good sewage system. They wanted a place where these people that were working 6 days a week could go. It would be free. Anybody,
because it was
rich or poor.
Industrial, right?
That's right. It was
yeah.
Industrial Revolution had happened, tenement houses had happened, and it was about give them a place. And a lot of times it was that cool place down by the creek where it was the picnic grounds. And the parks were originally called pleasure grounds. They were called picnic grounds. They weren't, and they were for rest and relaxation. They really weren't for public activity. In fact, it wasn't until about 1900 that the first swing sets were introduced, and they were told to kind of stay in the corner and stay fenced off because people wanted it as a place of beauty, rest, relaxation, return back to nature like maybe they had had in the countryside.
Okay, and now we know a whole different kind of idea of what parks are with Scissortail and the engagement and the activity of it all. Let's talk a little bit about, I never realized why there's so many lakes at all these parks too. Let's talk about what, those were the original swimming pools.
Yeah, a lot of times the bathing beaches and all, you know, there was a lot of things that happened. One is it was cooler, and the trees in the Great Southern Plains here, it was a prairie. So where were the trees, the native trees? They were down in the riparian soils. They were down next to the ponds. So that was the place where shade was. And they would talk about Wheeler Park, and they said 10,000 people a Sunday would descend on Wheeler Park. But what it was contingent on, a lot of it was contingent on, was it a place that people could get to? So the trolley lines would go out to where an area was. That's where the park was, and that's where development happened. Unfortunately, at the same time, because they were rivers and low bodies of water, a lot of times that's where flooding happened, and the fear of malaria from mosquitoes. So you turn around, and it was kind of a love-hate. Everybody wanted to go down there, but at the same time, there was stagnant water after a river flood. So you started seeing the city move upland, and they do that, but they had to sit there and plant more trees. They had to make it comfortable.
And yet now our Oklahoma River, renamed, is got the Wheeler District, and we've got Bricktown, and we've got all of this activity engagement that's kind of come full circle from what those people early in the 1900s, late 1800s kind of had envisioned.
If you read about Wheeler Park and all these people and all, and now you look at Scissortail Park, Myriad Gardens, and you look at those activities, very much the same, only 125 years difference.
And what's really cool is the Ed Lycan Conservatory was originally at Wheeler Park. It had moved a couple of times, right?
Yeah, there was a greenhouse that was there, and there's some talk about, was it actually that conservatory, but it was Lord and Burnham, and they talk about that. And then, because of all the flooding in Wheeler Park, they needed to sit there and move. The zoo, original zoo was there, and they moved, and the greenhouse moved to the Fair Park, which is where Douglas High School is. And that's it. But at the same time, 1929, the Oklahoma City oil field was founded right by Trosper Park there.
Guess what
and
won,
they said the fumes and the vibrations were so much they couldn't keep the glass from breaking, so it was taken back down, and it was moved and kind of mothballed, what we'd call, to Will Rogers Park. And then Henry Walter and his crew during the war did a lot of the construction. They hewn a lot of the wood themselves here, and they put up the original greenhouse here at Will Rogers.
I think your book is just fantastic, and a lot of it is history, obviously. It's true history, but it's got drama in it because of the oil booms, the bust, the economy, things like that, how it went into disrepair, and then it's come back. And Will Rogers is an example of that too.
And you know, working with the plant material, and you have USDA coming in and trying to figure out these alkaline soils and what was going to grow here. OSU working, the Woodward Test Station, Henry Walter working here. There were trifectas of very brilliant people that were trying to figure out how we're going to turn around and let this place develop.
Well, and speaking of plants, I see some cannas right behind you, and there's kind of some stories about how the canna played into Oklahoma City development also.
It played in it a big role from back at Wheeler Park all the way through.
Well, I can't sing your praises enough about this book. Where can people find a copy?
People can get this through Kirkpatrick Publishing in the local bookstores. They can ask their bookstore to order it. It's available many, many places, and love you know, there always need to be that next generation of park advocates, and hopefully this plays part of the history of what's been and what's to be.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Our tree for the Oklahoma Proven this year is the Atlas Cedar Horstmann. So many of you are familiar with Atlas Cedar. It's a very popular evergreen tree that we use here in Oklahoma and throughout the South. It's very tough, it's really heat tolerant, and it's a good replacement for the very common Colorado blue spruce. Colorado blue spruce has the beautiful blue-green foliage like these do, but they belong in Colorado. They like the higher elevations, drier climate, where this one, the genus or the species, Cedrus atlantica, is actually native to the Atlas Mountains in northern Africa. So it's very tolerant of heat and drier, hot conditions. Now, the species can get 40 to 60 foot high. I mean, it's a large tree and becomes a large, broad, pyramidal tree. With age, it becomes more flattened at the top. But this one here, which again is called Horstmann, is a cultivar. It's a semi-dwarf form of it that's perfect for the urban environment because of its small stature. So these trees here, I believe they planted these about 2006. So they're kind of a slow grower, and they get about 8 to 10 foot wide and maybe about 12 or so foot high. And so you can see these have aged well. They've filled in really nicely, and they're just gorgeous trees. They have this beautiful blue-green foliage. Now there are other Atlas cedars. They have just green foliage, and there's several blue foliage types too. But this again is one of the dwarf forms that's perfect for a smaller urban environment. So I just love this tree. Now, Atlas cedars are known in the trade to be difficult to transplant. So sometimes we run into some issues with that, but get a good specimen, get it planted well. Make sure you plant it in well-drained soils. And make sure you water it well and deeply for the first several years to get it established. But then once you get it established, you can back off on that watering and allow it to be, to be a little bit drier. So occasionally watering deeply, but you want to make sure that it has good drainage. Make sure that they're not planted too deep too, because that can sometimes cause an issue. Now they do best in full sun. And they really should be protected from high winds. So this group of trees here is located on the east side of one of our buildings on campus, and it does really well. So in general, you want to make sure if you're planting an Atlas cedar in your landscape that you just don't want to put it, where it's going to get blasted by the winds all the time. Now this group here has done really well, but 2 or 3 years ago, we had a mild winter, and then it was followed by, it was around Christmas time, and then we had a really drastic drop in temperatures, and we had a northeasterly wind that came in and it blasted these trees. And that spring, a lot of the needles on this side turned brown, and many of them dropped off, but it didn't damage the shoots. And so, as you can see, they recovered, they rebounded really quickly. So as long as the shoots are not damaged, they will bounce back really quickly. So again, this is a hardy tree for Oklahoma. It's a wonderful evergreen and great for the urban environment.
Today we're here with Dr. Jonathan Cammack, who is our Extension Livestock Entomologist, and we're talking ticks. It is midsummer, we're in the thick of it, and we're always worried about ticks and the hazard of them when we go outside. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of the habitat that maybe we might be exposed to them in?
Sure. So, in a gardening, backyard type situation, we want to think about the areas that are going to be protected and safe for the ticks. Okay. And ticks are spending about 90% of their life cycle off of whatever that host animal is that they're feeding on, whether that's a rodent, a bird, a dog, a cat, a cow, a deer. They're spending most of their time kind of in the environment hanging out. Okay. And a perfect environment would be like what we have over here behind us, this leaf litter. So after they take a blood meal, they drop off of that host animal. That way they can digest that blood meal and then molt to their next life stage. and they have to do that somewhere safe and protected.
Okay.
And beneath that leaf litter provides that perfect environment for them to be protected, but also have high enough humidity to not, die from the elements.
Okay, so they need some shelter and not be exposed to the hot sun, right? So how often do they sort of go through that cycle of dropping off, or how many hosts do they look for in their lifetime?
So a lot of the ticks that we have in Oklahoma are what we would call 3-host ticks. And so
Okay.
that means over the course of their life, they're going to feed on 3 different host animals. Typically, they get bigger with each life stage. So a larval tick we might see on a rodent, a nymphal tick we might see on something a little bigger, maybe a dog or a raccoon, and then adult is going to be on a deer, a cow, a person,
Okay.
really whatever kind of, big animal they can come into contact in the environment.
Okay.
Kind of our 2 main problems that we're going to have during the summer across most of the state are going to be Lone Star ticks and American dog ticks. So our Lone Star ticks are the ones that have that bright white spot right in the middle of their back. They're the one that most Oklahomans are probably familiar with, and that's really our biggest problem from a kind of a human health perspective. There are a number of pathogens that we can contract by being bitten by one of those ticks. So you want to be vigilant in making sure you're protecting yourself from them.
Okay, so speaking of pathogens, we have Lyme disease, we have Rocky Mountain fever, right? And then, of course, now alpha-gal is a big one that we hear about. Can you talk a little bit about any of those?
Sure. So Lyme disease, we don't really have in Oklahoma.
Okay.
So the ticks that are vectors of Lyme disease aren't feeding on the rodents at their early life stage, that larval stage, in order to be able to pick up the pathogens. So we have very, very few true documented cases of Lyme disease occurring in Oklahoma.
Good
which
news.
is
Good news.
It's great, right?
Yeah.
But we have a whole bunch of other things.
Okay.
So Lone Star ticks can transmit a whole bunch of pathogens, including tularemia, ehrlichiosis, southern tick-associated rash illness, and then even they're also the causative agent of alpha-gal syndrome, or that red meat allergy.
Which we're hearing a lot more about. And that's not necessarily a disease, right? Tell me a little bit what you know of that.
Yeah, it's basically an allergic reaction that your body has after being bitten by a Lone Star tick. So most of the Lone Star ticks are feeding on other animals in the environment. They're picking up things with their saliva that comes into their body, and when they bite us, we have a reaction to that saliva. And that reaction isn't immediate. It could be a month later, it could be even 6 or 8 months later, after our bodies had a chance to really kind of react to being bitten by that tick. And once you eat a mammalian-based product, whether that's a steak or some cheese, or maybe even drink milk, if you're unlucky enough to get a really bad case of it, you're going to have an allergic reaction, but it's not going to be a typical allergy, right? You're not going to sneeze. Very rarely do you see a rash, but most often what we see with alpha-gal are digestive issues. So you might have a steak for dinner and wake up in the middle of the night, and think you've got food poisoning, and really what's happening is your body is attacking that protein.
So of course we want to avoid ticks. So some of the areas we should stay out of, piled up leaves and things like that. But what can we do to protect our body also?
Right, there are a lot of things that we can do, aside from staying out of the, don't roll around in the leaves unless you have to. But we can take a number of different approaches. We can use chemical protection. So most synthetic pyrethroid products, like a permethrin, that you could go down to a sporting goods store or something and buy, those are very, very good tick repellents. You could take the pants that you might want to be working in your garden in or something, lay them out, follow the label directions, spray them really good with that product, allow them to dry, and then you could wear those pants while you're working in the garden. But you could also tuck your pants into your socks.
Yeah.
That way the ticks can't get inside your pants and get on your skin. But one of the best things we can do after coming in from being outside, whether that's working in a garden or hiking or even taking the dog for a walk, is to do a tick check. And that's to make sure that we don't have any hitchhikers that are going to feed on us and potentially give us a pathogen.
Okay, so say we do find a tick, we don't know how long maybe it's been attached to us or something like that. What should one do?
Yeah, remove it is our first step. You don't want to burn it with anything, whether that's a cigarette lighter or something, because if you burn them, it will actually cause them to kind of vomit or regurgitate. And if they have a pathogen that you have not yet gotten from them, the chances that you're going to get it now have just increased because you've forced it into your body. So the tick mouth parts, you want to grab those with a very fine pair of tweezers, really close to your skin where they've attached, and gently pull. That way you can dislodge those mouth parts and the tick. Okay. And then you'd want to keep it, maybe put it in a Ziploc bag or something and stick it in the freezer for the next couple of weeks, because if you start to experience some symptoms, maybe you start to get a fever or something, you want to have that tick. That way you can take it with you to the doctor and say, this is what bit me, so that the proper test can be run to determine what you may or may not have.
I've heard you should scotch tape it to a calendar on the date you find it.
You could do that, yeah.
So they can test for ticks potentially if you suspect that there might be a tick problem that you're experiencing?
Yes, some ticks can be tested, but it's also good to be able to identify what bit you. We know certain ticks are responsible for carrying certain pathogens, so we can use that to help support or maybe refine what you might be getting tested
Just
for.
through IDing the specific tick.
Correct.
Okay, well, thank you for this information. We appreciate you sharing it with us today. There are a lot of great horticulture activities this time of year. Be sure and consider some of these events in the weeks ahead.
Join us next week as we learn about different ways to start the next round of crops, right here on Oklahoma Gardening.
David, why did I say David? Sorry. Just screwed that up, didn't I?
Can sometimes cause an issue. And my mind just went blank.
To find out more information about show topics as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure to visit our website at oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. Join in on Facebook and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. Tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater gem. We would like to thank our generous underwriters, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, and Shape Your Future, a program of the Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust. Additional support is also provided by Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, the Oklahoma Horticulture Society, the Tulsa Garden Club, and the Tulsa Garden Center.